Do you have a moment? If so, then I'd like to tell you a story. It's the story of how my wife and I met. So, it requires a bit of backstory. My wife, Rhain Alisha, was on her great adventure in Alaska. She was backpacking through Alaska, visiting old friends from high school, and she was also looking for a place of her own, trying to figure out if she wanted to move to Alaska, and if so, what region. So, my backstory. A few weeks prior, I had been in Los Angeles with my family. My dad was doing some medical treatment there, and the entire time that I wasn't with my dad, I was hanging out with my best friend, Bobby. So, Bobby, she was planning on coming to visit the following week after I left. So, I left Los Angeles, and the next morning, after I landed in Juneau, I got a phone call, and I was told that Bobby had passed away, that she was no longer with us. I was devastated. She was my best friend, and she was literally coming up that week to see Alaska. To see my Alaska. So, the following week was the funeral. I flew back down by myself, and I attended the funeral, and then I flew home. About another week passed, and I was just done. I was devastated. It hit me very hard. And I was done. I stopped trying to make new friends. I stopped trying to date. I stopped trying to get numbers. I just stopped. I just focused on the things I was creating, and that was it, because the things I created with my hands would never die. So, Bam, one day, needed someone to accompany him to town, because you always should travel in pairs. It was a 45-minute boat ride in our skiff, and the weather was okay. It was a little drizzly, but that was about it, and we headed into town. At the top of the ramp at the parking lot was our church van that we had borrowed for, and I decided to sit in there and make some phone calls to my few remaining friends while Bam was taking care of his business inside of the harbor shack. So this is the first portion of the story, and it's really where the story begins. This is. So the introductory is over, and regretfully so is this first video. Tune in for the next video. You should be able to scroll and find it, and I will do the next portion of the story of how Rhain Alisha and I met. Welcome to part 2 of the story of how Rhain Alisha and I met. If you haven't seen part 1, scroll to find it, and here we go. So we were at the Harbor Master Shack. Ben was inside on the phone, and I decided to sit in our church van in order to be able to call some of my remaining friends. But beforehand, to skip back, Bam and I took the van, and we went to go get fuel and supplies, and we drove to the store, and I was just done, completely done. Didn't want any friends, didn't want a girlfriend, didn't want anything, right? We were just going to die. So as we were driving, we drove to the hardware store, got supplies, drove to get some fuel, got some food, and we were headed back to the dock. Bam, so Bam could go in and call, right? On the way back, we cut through by the school, by the playground, and at this point it was still sprinkling, right? The sun was coming out, but it's still sprinkling. And we passed this person walking, big backpack, a jacket all zipped up, you could only see this much of their face, and they were walking by, and I looked up, and Bam was staring at the road, and I looked up and made eye contact with this woman, and she looked at me and smiled. And it was just a really pretty smile, just like one of those, like, brightens your day, and for just that much of a second, I forgot that I was completely shattered as a person. And I sat there, and as we drove and she walked, she looked until her head reached about here, and then kept walking. And as she did, I'm like, and I reach over and I tap Bam on the shoulder. I'm like, Bam, Bam. He's like, what? I'm like, did you see that? And he's like, what? See what? I'm like, that smile. It was the most beautiful smile I've ever seen. And he's like, no, I missed it. And I turn and literally tell him, I'm like, then you were less of a man for it. And go back to staring out the window. And then we drive. Right, so we get to the Harbor Master Shack. I know, I'm a jerk. We get to the Harbor Master Shack, and we park. And as we park, Bam goes in to the Harbor Master Shack. The rain stops. The sun comes out. and I'm sitting there, and I'm talking to my friend on the phone. And on the phone, I'm explaining to my friend that I'm done, that I don't want any more friends. The friends I have are it, because everyone will just die. That the only things that don't die are the things I create with my hands, my tools, my inventions, my creations, that's it. And that I was done. I wouldn't seek another friend, I wouldn't seek romance, that I was done. And the story continues in the next part. I don't want it to cut me off in the middle of speaking, so if you want to see the next one, scroll and you'll be able to find it. So, part 3 of the story of how I met my wife. It's a little perturbing, it being cut down to 3-minute sections, but I'm doing my best without skipping any details. So, as I was sitting in the van talking to Caitlin, I was just so sad, and explaining how everyone's just going to die. And I didn't want friends, I didn't want romance, I was done looking. And we sat there, and she was telling me how her grandmother passed away, and how it made her feel, and how she dealt with the loss and whatnot. And I was listening, and as I'm listening, this girl with short curly hair walks in from the side, up front, and stops in front of the vehicle, because this is right where the harbor is, that where it starts, standing about 10 feet in front of the vehicle, looking out towards the harbor, and looking at the boats. And she's sitting there as my friend's talking, and all of a sudden I'm just, like, ignoring, and I notice that this girl is just standing there rubbing her hand, right? She's just rubbing her hand, playing with her hand, and she's sitting there smiling for no reason. What right does this really pretty girl have to smile at a time like this, where I'm just distraught, right? I'm destroyed. It's been 2 weeks since my best friend passed away that was coming up to see me. And this girl, just for no reason, is just smiling. Just to herself. Just smiling. And I'm sitting there, and I remember thinking that that's that smile I saw a minute ago as we were driving. And it really is. It's a pretty smile. And I sat there and decided to enjoy that smile like you would enjoy a sunrise or a sunset, because it's fleeting. Right? She's going to walk away in a couple seconds. I'm not going to see her again. But it's a pretty smile. And I took that moment to be like, okay. And enjoyed the smile that this girl was just giving the world. And then all of a sudden, she turns around and sees me, looks shocked, jumps 3 feet off the ground like a cat when she notices I'm looking at her, lands, awkwardly waves, I wave, and then she just scuttles off. And I'm thinking, that's funny, right? It's a little bit funny. And she scuttles off. So I continue talking to my friend Caitlin, about 10 minutes, 10-15 minutes, and I'm still sitting there in the van, and Bam's still in there talking on the phone, but so am I, so this is the next interesting part. I'm running out of time, though, for this video. For the next one, please scroll and find it, because this is the really, really good part. Okay, this is the next part of the video. If you haven't seen the beginning of it, scroll back to find them. This is the story of how I met my wife. So I'm sitting in the van, and the pretty girl had already scampered off, because I scared her on accident, and I'm sitting there, and I'm talking to my friend, and I'm like, look, I'm in the passenger side seat, and I'm like, look, Caitlin, I'm done. And she's like, you shouldn't just give up, but there's someone out there for you. You can't just give up on finding friends, at least. And I'm like, no, my best friend passed away, made me realize that if I did find the woman that I've been searching for since I was 5, is when I started looking for my soulmate, she's gonna die. She'll just die. Or I will, and she will feel how I do. And that's just an awful thing to curse someone with. To be cursed with falling in love. To be cursed with losing someone. So I tell her, I'm like, look, you're right. Okay, you're right. Everyone has someone, but I'm done. And if God wants me to be with someone, then he'd better make her walk up and say hi. Knock, 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 knock on my window. Instant. Knock, knock, knock on my window. I turn, and I look. And that pretty girl with the smile is standing there. And I'm like, just a second, Caitlin. And I put the phone down. And I roll the window down. And she sits there and she's like, "Hi, I just wanted you to know," and I quote, "Hi, I just wanted you to know you scared the bejeebers out of me." And I sit there for a moment. It's the first time ever talking to a woman that my mind went blank. I'm like, I'm sorry. Your smile was just so distracting, I couldn't help but look. No, your smile was so beautiful, I couldn't help but stare. That was it. And she giggles, and I'm like, "Caitlin, I'll call you back." And I set the phone down. Literally, I say the words, "If God wants me to be with someone, then he better make her walk up and say hi." Not a knock on my window. It rolls down, and Rhain Alisha says hi. It's the end of this part of it, but it continues, so please find the next portion of the story in the next video. Time is running out. I don't want cut off on me in the good parts. So yeah, it gets more believable. It gets. Okay, continuing the story of how Rhain Alisha and I met, and began to date up until marriage. So, here's the continuation. I literally had just said that if God wants me to be with someone, then better make her walk up and say hi. Not on top of my window. I roll it down. She says hi. "I just want you to know you scared the bejeebers out of me." First time ever blanking, and I'm like, I'm sorry. Your smile was so beautiful, I couldn't help but stare. She does a little giggle, and I'm like, "Caitlin, I'll call you back." And I set it down, and we've been knocking through the door. And she's like, "Well, I'm a tourist." My word, not hers. She's like, "I'm backpacking, and I'm looking for somewhere that I can rent a four-wheeler. Do you know anywhere?" I happen to know somewhere. I'm like, "Captain Dan rents four-wheelers," right? So, doing the polite and gentleman thing, I step out of the vehicle, and I'm sitting there, and I'm gauging everything, and I notice that she actually has a wedding ring, but I notice that on the same hand, she also is wearing a thumb ring of the same style as the silver band on her ring finger, just a little bit thicker, and on the thumb, indicating it's a man's. So I'm sitting there talking to her, and I'm calculating all this in my head, which means if she's wearing a ring on that finger, it means she's married. If she's wearing one on the thumb, it means that he's most likely passed away, which means she's not married, just wears the rings out of respect. I was wrong on both accounts. So we started talking about it. I'm like, "Well, do you need one or two for your husband, or are you alone?" And this and that, and I find out the information. Turns out neither. It was her man repellent. It didn't work. Apparently the first person ever it didn't work on. And I tell him, like, "Look, you can rent a four-wheeler over there, or I can do it, because I own a four-wheeler, and I'm actually a guide. I do wilderness guiding and whatnot, and out on the Forest Service roads and logging roads out where I am, epic roads, right? So how about instead I can be your guide, you can hire a guide for cheaper, you can get the four-wheeler ride, you get a boat ride that will let you see whales, because they're out there, and I can come back tomorrow morning and pick you up." It worked. However, we continued to talk for 3.5 hours. Give or take. So, I'm going to continue the story in the next video, so scroll and find that one.